Noswaith that. Good evening. Welcome to today's event with young rail professionals. I am James Bennett, the chair of YRP Wales, and I'm delighted to introduce this webinar on Transport for Wales' rolling stock strategy. Before we get started, I just want to make a quick introduction. For those of you who are new to young rail professionals, we are a not-for-profit organisation that works to promote the rail industry as a great place to work, inspire the next generation of railway talent, and develop young people to reach their potential. We're made up of people from all aspects of the rail industry and are led by committees of volunteers. We're always looking for more people to get involved, either as a member of YRP or an organising committee member for one of our regions. For those of you who are not yet members of YRP, it's free to join. We host lots of events like this one, and the best way to find out about them is to sign up our website, www.youngrailpro.com. Speaking of future events, we have quite a few YRP Wales events coming up over the next couple of weeks. Next Tuesday, the 5th of October at 5:30, we'll be hosting an event on sustainability within the rail industry in Wales. That's going to be with Transport for Wales' Sustainable Development Manager, Natalie Rees, and Project Manager, Dr. Louise Moon. And then on Friday, the 15th of October, we'll be hosting our first in-person social event for nearly 2 years. That's taking place at the Crofts Hotel in Cardiff. It will be great to see a lot of you there. Spaces are limited, so I'd recommend signing up as soon as possible. We're also hoping to host 1 or 2 more in-person events before the end of 2021 and a couple more in 2022 in conjunction with some of our neighbouring YRP regions. Plus, there are also a lot of events happening nationally. Is of course Rail Week next week, where we work to promote the opportunities available in the rail industry to young people. And there are several events on over the course of the week. Check out our website for more details. And then after that, on the 13th of October, we have the first of our national Welcome to Rail events, which provide a fantastic introduction for those of you who are new to working in the rail industry, explaining the history of the industry in the UK and giving some insight into how some of its key aspects work. But on to tonight's event. It gives me great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, my friend and colleague, Andrew Gainsbury. Andrew has been our Rolling Stock Strategy Manager at TFW Group since the start of 2019, overseeing the relationship with the Rolling Stock team at Transport for Wales Rail, as well as key suppliers and partners. Prior to this, Andrew worked for Pullman Rail in Cardiff, which recently became part of the TFW Group just a few weeks ago. It's an important industry company providing maintenance and refurbishment of rolling stock from many operators throughout Britain. So without further ado, I will hand over to Andrew, who's going to take us through TFW's plans for its existing fleet and what we can expect from the new rolling stock that will be entering service over the next couple of years. Please feel free to send over your questions as we go along. We will have time at the end for answering these. So over to you, Andrew.
Hi there. Thanks, James, for that kind introduction there. As James says, I'm the Rolling Stock Strategy Manager for Transport for Wales. So by way of a brief agenda that I just put up there, I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about Transport for Wales, what we're about, and some of the changes that some of you will have been aware that happened about 6 months ago, which had quite an impact on sort of how we work day to day. Then a bit of background about the South Wales Metro and you know, some of the things that have been announced there, because of course that has a big impact on the fleets that we're going to be introducing, as I'll talk about later on. And by way of setting the scene, the fleet that was inherited from Arriva Trains Wales, then I'm going to go on and talk about the Cascaded fleets that have come in more recently. And I will admit now, in my current role, I have more responsibility with the Cascaded fleet, so I'm probably focusing on that than a little bit more than the new fleet. But don't worry, I'm not leaving the new fleet out either. I've got a few slides on that, talk through those trains, what their capabilities are, and I'm pleased to say as well I've been able to get some hot off the press photos of some of the new fleets as well, which I hope you'll find of interest. Okay, so without further ado, who is Transport for Wales? since I think it was October 2018, management of the Welsh Rail service has been devolved to the Welsh Government, and initially it was, I'm going to say, a traditional style sort of franchise reporting into Transport for Wales, with Transport for Wales effectively doing the equivalent of what the DfT does for English services, should we say, and then in turn the Transport for Wales being responsible to the Welsh Government. Except in many ways it wasn't very, the same as a lot of the franchises, because there was a huge infrastructure element of that in terms of the metro transformation that we'll come on to in a minute. But it was sort of broadly the franchise reporting into the authority, reporting into the government. But as has happened across the UK, COVID bit, and that had far-reaching impacts across the whole of the rail industry, and it's fair to say that a lot of those structures unravelled. So since the 7th of February 2021, the rail operation, Transport for Wales Rail Limited as it's called, is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Transport for Wales, as in the authority, and reports into Welsh Government. I mean, it's unfortunate the way things happen there, and the timing of things and the impact of the rail industry. But I think as a structure and as a team, I think it has helped us where naturally there's sort of perhaps conflicting priorities with the sort of TOC authority type relationship. Now we are a lot more pulling in one direction, and I think that has helped a lot of progress be made sort of even over the last 6 months, if I'm honest, and sets the scene positively going forward. So in terms of at network, although we're branded as Transport for Wales, strictly it's the Wales and Borders franchise, and perhaps down to the geography of Wales itself, where a lot of the transport networks run east-west. We run a lot of services into England, as you can see from the map there, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, Cheltenham, all on our network. And one of the interesting dynamics is that those services that run into England, we have a responsibility to DfT in terms of service levels, just to further complicate things. And I think another thing that even when I was looking at this map earlier, it strikes me is how diverse a network we've got when we actually think about it. Some networks are sort of just all intercity, all local services, and we pretty much have a bit of everything. And the South Wales Metro is very much a sort of urban commuter network. Then you've got long distance services to Manchester, which are bordering on being intercity style services. And then we've got some very rural routes, the heart of Wales and Conwy Valley, etc. So it's quite a diverse network, and from a fleet perspective, that challenges the types of trains that we've got in the fleet now and that we're getting in the future. So a bit of background behind the South Wales Metro. That's been at the sort of the core of the announcements. Firstly with the Keolis Amy franchise, and with the work that we've inherited as Transport for Wales. So the Cardiff and South Wales areas are very dense rail network. If a lot of it goes back to the days of the coal mines, and a lot of the lines were originally built for freight, but it's left a really good legacy of a good urban network that stretches up to the valleys, and it's absolutely critical in providing jobs for some of these deprived areas where they're still suffering even today from the closure of the coal mines. So in terms of the societal benefits, modernizing that network was absolutely a key part of the well, say firstly the Coleus Amy set up, and you know what Transport for Wales is all about. So firstly the core valleys lines, so that's all of the lines up to Treherbert, Aberdare, Merthyr, Rumney, north of Cardiff. They transferred from Network Rail ownership in spring 2020, and yes, it's right, that happened right in COVID, as if there wasn't enough challenges. And that then allows us to be, let's say, master of our own destiny in terms of the timing and managing of the infrastructure works. And again, key to this is smart electrification of all the routes. So whereas traditionally you have continuous electrification, these routes will see discontinuous electrification. A lot of that's dictated by a lot of very tight clearances, particularly on bridges and stations, etc. And then to operate on those routes, and I'll talk in these in more detail, we've got 2 Stadler fleets coming in, both of which are combined electric battery fleets that will be able to operate across the CVL without using diesel, you know, and therefore, you know, very much driving towards our decarbonisation targets. And of course, you know, part of that is going to be a significant increase in the service that's provided, new stations, redoubling of some of the lines to improve frequencies, new bridges and new depots. So I've got a couple of maps here that show quite well the transformation there. And to thank Steve Whitley, colleague in the timetabling team, for putting these together. So this is the current service level. So you've got, you know, generally sort of 2 trains an hour on most of the routes to the tops of the valleys, and you know, at the other end down to Barry and Penarth. Okay, and they're all fulfilled. Well, actually that sign's a bit out of date because they're not fulfilled by 14X anymore. It's 150s and 769s, but pre-COVID those are the 2 types that were operating the services. And after the transformation, a massive increase in services, as you can see there, and all services will be in the hands of the new Stadler fleets, the class 398s and the 756s. Okay, so that's a bit of background behind what's happening on the network as a whole. So to move into sort of the fleet strategy, I'll start with where we started in September 2018, and the franchise had been operated by Arriva Trains Wales, reporting into the DFT for 15 years. And I think there's a lot that Arriva did quite well. There's some areas they certainly came in for criticism, but what you have to remember is that the basis that the franchise was let on was a zero growth basis. So in terms of you know, doing what they were contracted to do, they did it very well. But it meant that come September 2018, when it transferred to Transport for Wales, there probably was an inadequate fleet in terms of capacity, and also you know, with the end of the franchise coming up, there hadn't been much progress in terms of modernising the fleet, refurbishments, and you know, perhaps most critically the PRM, the accessibility works that are required by law to be completed by the end of 2019. So you'll see there are a few fleets in Arriva colours, the much maligned Pacers in the top left, though I must admit personally, you know, a little bit of a soft spot for them, you know, considering they were built for you know, to last for 10 years on very rural routes by you know, at the time they were replaced, they had done well over 30 years service, and they were absolutely packed to the gunwales, you know, traipsing up and down the valleys every day. So they don't owe anybody anything, that's for sure. 150s in the bottom left, another core fleet in core type in our fleet, and the bottom right there, class 175s. Then of course you'll see top right, I couldn't resist not putting a picture of the class 37s in, and strictly whilst they weren't with us when we inherited the fleet, Transport for Wales was very keen to make a very quick statement about increasing capacity, and as there'll be a common theme in this certainly next few slides, there's very little diesel rolling stock out there, particularly of types that were known to train crews and maintenance depots. So we reintroduced class 37s, which had last previously operated on the Rumley line, I think in 2005, and nobody saw those coming back. And they certainly made a very positive statement of intent. And I think we were very lucky that the locos we got from Colas plus the coaching stock from Riviera was both in very good condition and matching liveries, as you'll see there. So it had quite a retro feel about it, and I think it captured people's imagination, even if it would have been nice if they had been a bit more reliable. But that was only ever a stopgap, and certainly not a practical solution long term. So they were phased out in early 2020. So one of the first things that we were very keen to do was to refurbish the existing fleet, and really good progress has been made on that. And actually it's interesting now, if you stand, for example, on Cardiff Central Station, the progress that has been made. There are very few Arriva trains, liveried units operating now. All the Pacers have now gone. The last of those went in May. The class 150s there are now rapidly going through refurbishment and re-livery. Must be getting on for half of those that are done now, and they're the fleet that's sort of last in the process. So you'll see there 158s, they've all now been rebranded. The 175s top right there, very good progress being made on those as well. Only a handful left in Arriva colours, and if I'm honest, they were probably the most tired of the fleet. So you'll see there from the picture at the bottom there, they do look really smart now. Internally now, they've been retrimmed, new carpets and everything else. So smart looking train now. So moving on, as I said, one of the challenges was providing sufficient capacity, and whilst we've introduced some cascaded fleets, as I'll come on to, fortunately we've seen a lot of an increase in passenger numbers, and of course that's dipped in the last 18 months. But the Welsh Government again, has been very keen to sort of make that statement that it's not going to be business as it was under Arriva, and bring extra trains in. And other than the class 37s that we just talked about, the only other type that really has been available has been class 153. So it's not unreasonable to say we have been quite literally scouring the country for them. So you can see there, quite a few different liveries have been imported into the Welsh network. So you'll see bottom left there, ex-East Midlands one, and top right there, ex-Greater Anglia one, although fortunately it looks a bit like a TfW livery. But all of those are now being refurbished into TfW colours and being PRM'd. As we only made a last minute decision to hang on to some of those units. Some of them are still undergoing PRM modification, and as a result we do have a dispensation in place just for a handful of those through to the end of the year. And all of those are operated with PRM units where they need to, but they have helped us out quite considerably, and as you can see there, a total of 26 units in the fleet. Okay, so moving on to the cascaded fleets that we've been introducing over the last few years, and there's been a lot of focus of my workload. The first of these, and probably the easiest, is the Class 170s, a total of 12 units that came from Greater Anglia, and again we've really benefited that they are, the Greater Anglia livery is very similar to ours, so we haven't had to repaint those, and even internally the branding is very similar to our colour scheme. So they came in reasonably successful around the end of 2019, so a total of 12 units. Initially a bit unreliable. I think a lot of that down to the trains not being known locally, and I think, as is always the case at end of a lease at Greater Anglia, would have kept their expenditure to a minimum, understandably. Only downside that fleet is a limited route clearance. They operate to Maesteg, Cheltenham and Ebbw Vale, and unfortunately even when we short of rolling stock we haven't been able to sort of really utilise them beyond that, but playing a core role in our fleet at the moment. Okay, the next fleet that I'm expecting people will have read about is the Class 769s, which are converted Class 319s. There's a total of 9 of those that have joined our fleet, and these were probably the core of our strategy to replacing the Pacers, so are absolutely critical to have those in service as soon as possible. And if I'm honest, it certainly presented us with a few challenges along the way. The programme was running late for a number of reasons, so late in us delivering the trains, and we have had a number of technical challenges with them entering into service. We had to put them into service last November to, in a way to get them embedded in the fleet and flush those issues out. So a total of 8 trains in the fleet now. They are very well received by passengers on the Rumney route. You can see there a couple of internal pictures. They are very nice inside, again, fully refurbished. And I have to say as well, although we've had some reliability issues, they are now starting to turn the corner. We've had some really good collaboration working with Porterbrook as the owners of the units. And with Gemini and Brush, who've been doing a lot of the conversion. So whilst it's had its challenges, I'd like to think it's got a good ending to it, and a massive improvement on the service levels on the Rumney route there. Okay. So another of the fleets that is now in service is the Mark IVs. Some of you may be aware that we operated a very small fleet of Mark III coaches that were inherited from Arriva Trains Wales on a once daily Holyhead to Cardiff service. Now those were not PRM compliant, and also they were getting very tired as well. So this was part of the Keolis Amy bid that we've carried on, was to introduce Mark IVs on that route that have come off the East Coast Main Line, and not only that, they've the service has also been increased to 3 services daily as well. The Cardiff Holyhead route is important as a long distance route, but also politically as for linking North and South Wales. So again, every fleet has had its challenges, and I didn't specifically mention it on the 769s, but one of the big challenges come COVID that nobody could foresee is that you couldn't carry out crew training and driver training because you simply couldn't have 2 people in the cab together. So it was a good 6 months that it was completely stopped for. So the new train fleets really couldn't progressed towards entry into service, and that certainly stalled the Mark IVs. But having said that, we've now got all 3 sets in service, and they are operating 3 times a day between Cardiff and Holyhead, and appear to be operating very reliably now, and are being very well received by passengers. And some of you might be aware that we're actually increasing the fleet, but I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. The last of the Cascaded fleets I wanted to mention is the Class 230s. These are the converted District Line D78 trains that have been converted to diesel battery hybrid units. So again, quite a novel idea there, and we're hoping they'll be the first hybrid trains that in passenger service in the UK. They'll be dedicated to the Wrexham Bidston route and will allow a doubling of the service frequency there. So again, we've had a few challenges with that fleet, some of them technical, but particularly related to COVID. So crew training is now well underway on that fleet, and we're hoping they'll be in service in very early 2020. And you'll see here again another really smart modern train, and they're absolute step change to the 150s that are currently operating on that route. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, there's perhaps as part of the changes in structure with TFWs or the rail operation coming in-house, it gave us the opportunity to look very critically at the rail operation that we're providing. And I think one thing that we're very mindful of, as well as the rest of the industry, is that going forward after COVID, that quality of service is going to be absolutely vital in attracting passengers back, particularly from in terms of the leisure market. So we're very keen to improve the service offering that we provide, and the opportunity to purchase additional Mark IVs became available from Eversholt, the owners of them. So we've purchased the 4 sets that were refurbished for Grand Central's Blackpool service, which sadly was one of the victims of COVID. But it's what's the saying? It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. There was no other sort of immediate prospect of them being used, and I think uniquely in Wales we have that ability perhaps to make decisions that would have been a bit more difficult with the sort of DfT control of TOCs in England, and perhaps that very different or subtly different prioritisation in Wales, where there's still a very strong desire to move people onto public transport, or all the stars aligned for the right timing to purchase these, and we're now undergoing a program of converting them to make them Class 67 compatible. They're going through some initial dilapidations works at Wabtec's Doncaster works, as even these sets have been sat around for a year or so. They're then going to go into conversion works at Eastleigh, and we hope to start crew training between Manchester and South Wales for a December 22 entry into service. Another part of this is these sets here are 5-car compared to sorry, it's my cuckoo clock, compared to the 4-car sets that we've got in service already. So we're going to strengthen those services to 5-car to provide more capacity and have a common fleet. And the knock-on benefits of that will be that we'll be able to cascade Class 197s that were going to be operating between Manchester and South Wales to West Wales. And the second part of this plan is that we're going to be retaining some of the 153s for the heart of Wales, where we're going to be doing active travel modifications similar to those that have been carried out in Scotland. We're still at the concept stage of that at the moment to design exactly what it's going to look like, and I expect there's going to be quite a few differences to Scotland, but that's loosely what it's based on. So you might be asking what drops out the bottom here, because there's a lot of trains that are coming into the fleet at a time where passenger numbers are uncertain. And as part of a collaboration actually with DfT, which hopefully benefits the whole industry, our 170s are, once the Mark IVs are in place, are going to be moving on to East Midlands Railways. And that might seem a strange decision after, I've just been talking about them just joining the fleet, but I think the other element to this is we took a long, hard look at where we go decarbonisation wise, and became apparent that we're at the moment committed to a very large diesel fleet for a long term. So by purchasing Mark IVs and 153s and using those instead of 170s, we've been able to move one of our diesel fleets on. The Mark IVs of decarbonisation options in the fact they're loco hauled. So whilst we would be committing to 67s in the immediate term, longer term, we hope to be able to look at some kind of bi-mode or tri-mode loco to replace those. And even with the 153s, we see that as a sort of intermediate term retention. And again, we would probably be replacing those at some point, and it just gives us a lot more flexibility in our future fleet strategy, as well as in the near term, really enhancing our fleet, with the Mark IVs, intercity style train to Manchester, and the active travel 153. So, a lot of benefits coming out of that we really hope will attract passengers. Okay. So moving on to the new fleets and where we are with these. Now, part of the original Keolis Amy commitment was pretty much 95% of the train fleet's going to be replaced, and even despite what I've just talked about with Mark IVs and 153s, that certainly still remains the case. So a large order that was placed, there was probably, in terms of the number of units, pretty much 50-50 split between CAF and Stadler. So the first fleet that I wanted to talk about is the Class 197s, CAF Civity diesel units. So there's a total of 77 2- and 3-car units that are currently being assembled in Newport. And they're very similar to the Northern Class 195s and West Midland Trains Class 196s. And whilst they're straight diesel trains, they've got the latest MTU diesel engines that are commonly used across the rail industry, and are much more fuel efficient than Class 15Xs and even Class 17Xs in our fleet, and much improved performance as well. So these are going to be operating a lot of the regional services, particularly North Wales, Cambrian, and Marches, and just heard earlier they'll be operating right into West Wales as well. So they really will be seen all round Wales. The one bit you won't see them is that they won't be operating any of the CVL lines around Cardiff, as we'll see in a minute. So good progress has been made on those. The first units are now testing in North Wales. At the moment, that's still under sort of a CAF responsibility, shall we say, and the aim is that for the first of those units to be provisionally accepted within the next few months for entry into service in North Wales next year. And it's a very good, nice picture there at Blaenau Festiniog when one of the sets went down there. And typical Blaenau Festiniog weather there, though, unfortunately. Okay, so the second train fleet that'll come in, and these are pretty much in chronological order, is the first of our Stadler Flirt fleets. These would be straight diesel units. Okay, total of 11 cars that are broadly based on the class 755s that Greater Anglia are operating. And although I say they are straight diesel units, and they will be as delivered, the really nice thing about the Stadler Flirt is that it is built as an electric unit. And then you have the centre power pack. I don't know if you can see it there, the mini carriage in the middle of the train. You can pretty much insert that into it, and you know, as is the case with this, it's got 4 diesel engines in it, and that makes it a diesel electric unit. In theory, it's quite modular, so you can install batteries or even hydrogen power packs, or even, you know, and the aim is that hopefully in the future, when we get electrification, in theory, you can put a pantograph on that train and throw away the power pack entirely, and it becomes an EMU. So these will initially be operating on the Ebbw Vale, Cheltenham and Maesteg routes, taking over from the class 170s that we mentioned earlier, and are going to be moving on to East Midlands. They will also be capable of operating in multi with the class 756, the tri-mode units, which we will see later, which is, you know, I'm sure will be beneficial in due course. Now, if you're not aware, the Stadler Flirt is quite a novel train in terms of its design compared to anything else in the UK. And you know, having seen the 755s a few months ago firsthand, you know, really are a step forward in terms of accessibility. They are low floor and pretty much level boarding. Even without doing any sort of platform work. I wouldn't say they're in exactly level boarding, but certainly none of the big steps that you see on other train fleets. So that, combined with a big increase in the number of multi-use areas for bikes and pushchairs, and you know, of course, wheelchair space itself, will make these trains far more accessible than anything else that's operating on the network, and an absolute step change in the sort of service offering that's provided. And here's the first 2 trains in Stadler's facility in Switzerland. Unfortunately, because of COVID, very few people have actually seen them firsthand, including myself. And I know the first unit is now, I think it's in Romania, undergoing testing. But yeah, looking very smart there. Okay, so moving on to the other Stadler Flirt fleet is the class 756s. There's a few more of these. There's a total of 24 3 and 4 car units there. And again, these are going to be quite novel trains. They'll be the same sort of basic platform as the 231s with the level boarding there. And as you can see, they'll look very similar. But in terms of the traction package, they only have 1 diesel engine in the centre power pack, and the other 3 rafts are taken up by batteries. And these will be operating on the core Valleys lines, where, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be having the discontinuous electrification. Where there are wires, they'll be operating off the 25 kV, and whilst they're doing that, they'll be charging the batteries. So there are a number of sections, most notably through Caerphilly Tunnel, which is quite a lengthy section, where they'll operate entirely on battery. And even where they operate south of Cardiff, whilst they have the diesel engine running, they will still be operating through the batteries. Another part of the sort of novel design of this is, as you can imagine, if it relied on manual operation of the pantograph, you know, there will be the scope for human error and 1 or 2 interesting collisions with bridges. So there'll be a system of beacons put down across the network, which will automatically trigger the switch over between battery and electric, and raise and lower the pantograph as appropriate. So these trains are going to be following on in a couple of years' time from the class 231s. And the last of the new train fleets that I wanted to mention is our Class 398s, which are also being produced by Stadler, this time from their Valencia factory in Spain. And again, these are quite novel units. Firstly, they're going to be tram train. So as you can see from the picture there, they do look very much like trams in their design, but like the units on Sheffield, and I should mention that they are based on the Class 399s that Sheffield Supertram is operating. They are designed to heavy rail standards, so a lot of work in conjunction with Network Rail, ensuring the crashworthiness and the general compatibility on the heavy rail network. Okay, and indeed, I should be very clear that the core Valleys lines, Treherbert, Aberdare, Merthyr Tydfil, will stay as effectively heavy rail lines, certainly initially, and they will be operated as trains on those sections. But there are a lot of Welsh Government aspirations to extend the network beyond the existing network, particularly in the Cardiff area, and it's fully intended that some of those will be on street where they'll operate as trams on those sections. And the other novel bit of the design, similar to the Class 756s, is these are going to be bi-mode units. So they will be 25 kV, but they will also have batteries. So the aim being that where they operate on the on-street sections, they'll operate on battery, and again, in common with the Rumney line, there are low bridges and other sections on the Taff Vale lines to Treherbert, Aberdare and Merthyr where there's not the space to put the wires. So a combination of battery and electric operation there. They do also have the built-in capability for static charging from 750 volts. The benefit of that being that should we do some considerable length extensions on street, there may not be the battery capability to operate those without recharging. So very flexible units, and they'll be very high performance compared to the existing diesels, definitely, and revitalise so the Taff Vale lines there, particularly in combination with the 4 trains per hour. Okay, and I promised you some pictures that have never been seen in public before, as far as I'm aware, so this is a world exclusive here. These are pictures from Stadler of the first, I think that's actually the first 2 units that are being built there. So yeah, in fact, I think that's 2 of the units coupled together there for coupling testing. So you can see there, top left, the bogies, and quite an interesting picture for me. They're very compact bogies to accommodate the low floor there, and of course, very different design for the on-street running there, including I forget what they call it. Resilient wheels, so where most vehicles now have, rail vehicles have monoblock wheels, trams it's usual to have resilient wheels, where you almost go back to the old-fashioned tyres, and then you have a rubber layer between the tyres and the wheel centre, which makes deadens the noise when you go around a very tight corner. A couple of interior pictures there. It's a bit scruffy where they've got all the bits hanging down, but you can see they're quite open, wide and airy, with a lot of circulating area there for quick boarding. Yeah, and interestingly, you can see the way the couplers are hidden there, and in the bottom right there, it does look very much like a tram to me, the way the cover raises there and the coupler comes out. Okay. So with the 398s, because the fleet size as a whole increases, there needed to be additional depot capacity built to accommodate the total increased fleet size. There's going to be a brand new depot built at Taffswell, which is just 7 miles north of Cardiff on the Taff Vale lines there, and that's an artist's impression of what it'll look like. And the interesting thing is, with the tram trains being built to operate exactly that as trams, this depot can be built on what would be too restrictive a site for conventional trains, yet you can have tight curves that the tram trains can use to access the depot. So construction of that's underway and should be completed sometime next year. So that's all of our new train fleets, and I just wanted to end with a sort of a few thoughts for the future. And I ought to caveat this very carefully, that whilst a lot of these are perhaps aspirations of the Welsh Government and Transport for Wales, there are a few of my personal thoughts here. So please don't quoting this as TFW or Welsh Government confirmed policy. We talked earlier about in terms of the sort of overall fleet strategy, we'd be looking to replace the Class 153s in the in the not too distant future, and the Class 67 locos. So they give us immediate decarbonisation options with our existing fleets that we're going to be looking at quite closely once we've got all the new fleets on. I mentioned the on-street extensions with the tram train as well, and making good use of those as well. And just talking generally, it's probably worth stating that the Welsh Government has a lot of very stated aspirations to decarbonise, and in doing that, to encourage people onto the railways to decarbonise the railways themselves. And indeed, it's enshrined in law in the Future Generations Act here, which I think is a very positive step. And everything they do has to comply with that. So that will be driving modal shift aspirations. Some of you may be aware that the much talked about M4 Relief Road around Newport was shelved. I think it was a couple of years ago, and I think that was a very bold statement. Personally, I think the right decision as well to not build more motorways, and a big part of that was, well, if you're not spending the money on the M4, then it must be spent on local public and active travel infrastructure. So there's a lot of work going on there, which will see the enhancement of train services along that corridor. As well as that, there's a lot of aspirations for South West Wales and North Wales metros as well. I'll be honest, there's probably a bit more uncertainty under current financial situations, but those aspirations are still there, and I feel sure they'll be delivered. And I've put there electrification. Unfortunately, the infrastructure is not devolved in the same way as it is in Scotland, other than, of course, the core Valleys lines, which are being electrified. Certainly, I personally hope that there will be further electrification, because it's the obvious way of reducing costs, improving services, and decarbonising. And there's certainly, again, Welsh Government and TFW are pushing to Network Rail and DfT that we'd like to see the South Wales main line electrified, at least to Swansea, and the North Wales main lines. Whether that'll happen, I don't know. I think it's very clear from the technology that we're seeing both on our fleets and with the likes of the 230s, and interestingly what Merseyrail are doing with their 777 fleet, that battery operation beyond electrified sections is going to be a very viable option going forward. So I think it's going to be a combination of electrification on the main lines with battery operation beyond that. And picture down there of a Class 93, and again, don't take that as an indication of any specific intent of any of that being a type that we're going to introduce, but I put it there because everything I hear, that's going to be a very capable loco, and I would imagine that when it comes to replacing the Class 67s, that something like that is what we'll be considering. Though I'll hasten to say again, there's definitely no plans or anything firm to do that. And of course, the great thing with that as well is a loco like that, which is a tri-mode, then as hopefully we get the incremental electrification that can make use of it from day one. So you'll probably be pleased to hear of after 50 minutes of me talking, that's the end of the formal presentation. I hope you found it of interest and some useful information in there, and any questions from anyone?
Thank you very much, Andrew, for a very insightful and detailed presentation. We've got 10 minutes for questions. We've had a few in already. Lots coming in now, which I think we can probably answer between us. So for those that don't know, so I work in the communications team, Transport for Wales. But Andrew and I work very closely, so we kind of talk a lot about trains and stuff. So I think we should be able to kind of answer these between us. First question, a couple of questions in from Jonathan Prince. Thanks, Jonathan, for getting in touch. First one was, what is the reasoning behind stopping the plans to put the Class 230s on the Conwy Valley line? Would the battery capability not have been useful to make use of regaining energy from the steep gradients? For some context, the original plan for the Class 230s was for them to run on the Conwy Valley line and between Crewe and Chester for a year prior to full dedication to the Wrexham to Bidston line. This is now not happening. Andrew, are you able to give some more insight as to why that is?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I mean that was the original plan. One of the reasons I think was that when it is looked at in detail, there were a lot of elements that needed to be gauge cleared in a short period of time. So that combined with some of the delays that the delivery of that fleet saw, it just wasn't going to be viable to be introducing that fleet onto that route for such a short period of time. And particularly with COVID, that's probably proved to be the right decision. As you saw from the picture earlier, that the 197s will be operating that route, so it would have been a lot of expenditure for very little benefit.
Thank you. So we've had a couple of questions, one from Jonathan and one from Joseph Brown, asking what the plan is for the decarbonisation for the Class 197s. Are they going to be phased out relatively quickly due to the government ban on diesel-only trains that's coming in from 2040, or is there an option to convert them to zero carbon at a later stage?
Well, there's a number of things that are being looked at with that fleet. I mean, first thing I'll say is that they are very much more fuel efficient. I believe it's about 30% more so than the existing fleets, and of course, they meet the latest emission standards, so they are beneficial in their own right. There could be the option to make them hybrid trains. So you replace the current power pack with a sort of combined diesel engine and battery power pack. Though again, I must hasten to add, there's certainly nothing firm. There has been talk about whether we do that. I mean, and perhaps going on to what we were saying earlier, really, I mean, the way I see that perhaps evolving with that fleet is that as hopefully we get an increase in the size of the network, increase in the number of services, assuming that the long-term Welsh Government aspirations happen, that if routes get electrified, then you would see the 197s cascaded onto other routes, kind of thing.
Okay, cool. James Shanley asks, is the overall fleet upgrade future-proofed for future passenger growth, or does TfW have a growth strategy and future plans to expand the fleet?
Yeah, interesting question, and I sort of tried to shed some light on that. With the sort of last slide, I think to say we're in this very strange world of limbo at the moment, where fortunately Welsh Government is really keen to promote the growth of the network still, but there's just a small problem of the fact that there's not much money there at the moment. So it's a little bit difficult to have that sort of strategy, but I think that the strategy would be to try and get that electrification, and with the growth of the the network. Hopefully electrification would tie in with that, so you would see that cascade where you might have new fleets come in to the electrified routes. The Stadler Flirts particularly lend themselves to being converted to electric or by mode, and then the Class 197s cascaded down to the more rural routes where there's growth and new routes there, shall we say.
Jacqueline Trow, one of our colleagues from TFW, asks, have you had any difficulties matching the rolling stock that you could obtain with the feasibility of using it on the aging Core Valley Lines infrastructure? Were you limited as to what stock you could look for?
Yes, but certainly in the initial period, because there's some tight clearances on the CVL, the Taffrail lines in particular. So in the short term, if we can't even take a 153 up there, although one did make it up to Treher, but taking out a few platform edges a few months back, but perhaps I shouldn't mention that. So in the short term, we've been really restricted in what we can do, and it's been quite a almost like a game of Tetris, really. If we get 153s in, where can we move fleets around to get free up 150s, and now that we've got rid of the Pacers, the 150s are the only fleet that can operate the Taffrail routes. Longer term, I guess the trains have been designed to the new Stadler fleets have been designed to fit the routes, and there will be gauge clearance work as part of the transformation as well.
Yeah, I know. I think that's one of the big things that certainly customers don't necessarily always appreciate is not everything can run on every single route. It's not like one of the common complaints that we receive is, oh well, I saw a load of trains parked up in the depot, why aren't you using them? Sometimes it's because you can't necessarily just plonk trains on every single route, so it is a question, as you said, of fitting it all together. Ryo Brom. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
I was just going to add, it's an interesting dynamic. Most people think of the 150 as a bit of an unloved train. For us, they're absolute gold dust. And I'll even say it here and there. If anybody knows of anybody who's got any spare, we'd have them. Absolute gold dust as far as we're concerned.
We'll give Northern a ring now. What's happening? Ryo Bromley asks, what's happened to Class 175s and 158s? Will they stay at TFW or be cascaded? So I can give the sort of high-level summary. They are leaving, so it's a complete fleet replacement as far as Wales and Borders network is concerned. Andrew, are you able to give any more details around when they're likely to be leaving?
We're working a lot of detail at the moment around the sort of when the 197s will be entering service, but it's the sort of next 2 or 3 years that those fleets will be being phased out.
Question from Luke Stevenson. What are the main risks you see from the current strategy?
What the main risk? Well, I think the main risk really is we've got a lot going on in a short space of time, and again, I think it's a legacy of the fact that the time the franchise was awarded to Keolis Amy, and if you're at all familiar with sort of how franchises have worked elsewhere, there was a real sort of phase of the more new trains you offered, the more likely you were to win a franchise bid, and I think this was a case of that. And I think with justification, because Wales has always suffered from having hand-me-downs, so that was quite an attractive thing to get all new fleets. But what it does mean is, total fleet replacement on a network that hasn't had new trains since the 175s came in 20 years ago is going to be, quite a challenge in terms of people's way of working. And I think, if we had a time again, we'd probably say, well, actually, you might do the CVL first, and then you might replace the other fleets a few years later. But because it was part of the franchise bid, it's all coming at once. So I think it's just the timing of everything happening at once that's going to be the big challenge, and there will be bumps along the way. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, and one of the benefits of like the announcement last week that we made around staggering more of the new services we're introducing, it gives everyone a bit more breathing space for delivering those timetable changes, because we're all aware that other operators have had issues when they try to make a lot of changes in one go. It can be a lot of pressure, a lot of things to get done all at the same time, at least sort of staggering it a bit more. Obviously, there's the impact of COVID within that. It should mean that they will be delivered effectively. And then from David Phillips, South West Wales Metro plans new services radiating from Swansea to the Neath and Dulles Valleys. So at the moment, the West Wales, Swansea Bay and West Wales Metro is very much the concept stage. There was some public consultation that was done a few months ago by the Welsh Government and by Transport for Wales, working jointly with the local authorities in the area to understand what it is that people's priorities are for improving services. And it's not just the local services in and around Swansea, although that is a big part of it. It could also mean sort of faster services between West Wales and the rest of Wales, developing sort of metro style services in the Swansea area, utilising some of the redundant or underused infrastructure, I think is the best way to put it around the Swansea area, because there's a lot of old freight lines and the Swansea District line doesn't get used that much. Did you have anything further to add on that, Andrew?
Not really. I mean, from a rolling stock perspective, it's sort of very early stages. I've been involved in that, and as you say, some interesting concepts there, particularly around the Swansea District line, direct trains from West Wales to Cardiff, which is an aspiration. But yeah, it's still in early stages. And again, if that's combined with some electrification to Swansea, there could be some interesting, opportunities to use bi-mode trains there for sure.
Yeah, and I noticed that Alex Fortune, who's one of our North Wales team, was on the call as well. Hi, Alex. He said earlier that it's not typical Blaenau Ffestiniog weather. It wasn't raining. But yeah, so hi, Alex. Alex is part of our team working on North Wales Metro, and it's in a very similar sort of stage there, whereby there are some ideas. The Welsh Government made an announcement a few weeks ago, sort of indicating what the priorities are likely to be. It's still early stages, and I think the best thing to say is keep an eye out. We'll have some more news on that soon at Transport for Wales. But yes, we've run over slightly, but thank you very much, Andrew. That's been really insightful discussion that we've had tonight, and thank you for your presentation. Just to kind of wrap up from a YRP perspective, as mentioned at the start, for those of you who joined later, we've got our next event next Tuesday at 5:30, where Natalie Rees and Dr. Louise Moon from the Sustainable Development team at TFW will be building on a lot of the things that we've discussed around, sustainability within the train fleet, reducing everything to carbon zero, and not just that, but also the kind of wider sustainable development, meeting the goals of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And then after that, on the 15th of October, the week Friday, 2 weeks this Friday, I should say, we'll be hosting our first in-person social event for nearly 2 years at the Crofts Hotel in Cardiff. It would be great to see a lot of you there. And also the national events, you can find out more about those events happening for Rail Week and the Welcome to Rail induction series on the Young Rail Professionals website. That's youngrailpro.com. But yes, thank you once again to Andrew. Thanks for everyone for dialing in. This recording will be available after, so hi to everyone watching on YouTube. But yes, thanks everyone, and we'll catch you again soon.